To my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to translate security to non-security teams. So going to talk a lot more about how to make sure that the message that you're providing to people that might have a different technical understanding to you still remains clear and it is understood what they need to do. So the core message is security only becomes useful when people can apply it. So it's all well and good to have the information, but if they're not implementing it in their day to day, there's actually no point. So the goal isn't to make everybody, like security engineers or technical, but it's to almost prime them to understand or to identify when security issues occur, and mainly in the context of their role. So most teams are not ignoring security. You might feel like you're communicating to the team and they're not quite picking it up, or you're seeing repeated mistakes or whatever it is. And it's easy to interpret this as, people being combative or being resistant to change. But sometimes when you take a look at almost behavior, you realize that there's a fundamental lack of understanding. So us as security professionals, we haven't quite translated our messaging to land well with people that are non-technical. So the problem is security could often get explained in one language and received in another. So you might say things in a very technical, security friendly way, but if the person you're speaking to doesn't have a security understanding or a security background, there's almost a mismatch in I guess not education levels but understanding levels. So for example, let's say you don't have any information on plumbing and your plumber comes in and they explain it in the most scientific or engineering based way. You've heard them in terms of, yes, you can hear that their mouth is moving, words are coming out, but in terms of information, you're not really understanding it. So using that same analogy, someone might say to you that I'm not even going to attempt to be a technical engineer, but they might say something very, very long-winded and convoluted. And all you need to understand really is, how much is it going to cost? How long am I going to be without a kitchen sink? And what needs to be replaced, or what are the implications? That's all you really need to know. So you're thinking of yourself, you're thinking of, okay, how is that going to impact me? Think of it as the same for people you're talking to. So you might say to people that, let's say your development team, you might say that policy-wise, you're not allowed to use external libraries that haven't been approved. From their perspective, they need to understand what can they use them. So educate them on what they can use. Educate them on the examples you're talking about. So you might say any external material that is referenced within our code or something like that. You can get quite specific, but try and put yourself in their shoes and think, so like, what does that mean for them? It's like when someone says a really technical thing or something that's quite specific to their industry, and you're like, fantastic, great that you have that knowledge, but what does that mean for me? Because if you don't say what that means for them and, give examples of their world, so using that same example of not referring to external code libraries, giving that example, someone can say, oh, actually, I use code libraries, so what should I use instead? They'll follow up with actual questions to help you understand what they need to do instead, or what is not permissible, essentially. So don't just throw policy at people. Drill down a bit further and say these are examples. And that's why I'm always a massive advocate for role-based training. It's not enough to just throw a blanket statement. Get into the worlds of the people you're talking to. So whether it's a sales team, marketing team, especially people that interface externally to the business, get quite specific. So with like phishing and stuff, you can be generic to an extent, but more and more we're seeing very targeted attacks. So people that have, infiltrated mailboxes and they're sat in there looking and waiting for the right opportunity. It's no longer okay to just give like generic lazy training advice. We need to be a lot more specific. Okay, communication gap. So security teams explain controls, business teams need actions. So we always need to look at the business impact. So we might say, the security team might say, use multi-factor authentication. We might even say, use MFA. We're assuming that the audience understands what MFA is. But really we should say, use MFA, turn on either, whether it's the authenticator or SMSs, whatever it is, give them something specific that they should be following, or give them configuration instructions, give them every piece of information they could possibly need, so that they know the full extent to what you expect from them and what it will take to meet the standard as well. And then if I get using the MFA example, what if I get a prompt I did not request? Then give them follow-up instructions for the potential things, the adverse effects that might happen. So if they get a prompt they did not request, that means that something is awry somewhere and they need to report it. So inform them that they also need to report it. Follow access control. That's not enough. Give them specific examples. So let's say you've observed that there are 10 people using that one account, reusing like credentials, usernames, etc. Give them a specific instruction that it's not appropriate or it's not acceptable to do that, and then give them an alternative. So, and also give them a transition period. So a lot of the time people, security can clamp down and say that, we're not allowed to do X, Y, or Z, but there's no alternative given. If people are doing something, a lot of the time it's because it's necessary to complete the job. So understand where they're coming from, understand any struggles or anything that might be preventing them from doing their job, and then give them solutions. Protect sensitive information. So can I email this file? Give that for things that are ultra sensitive, whether it's, let's say you need to use a secure email or whatever it is, make sure you understand what their challenges are so that there's no need to use things that we don't want them to use. So whether it's like a USB or using like unapproved file share apps or whatever it is, make sure that you have alternatives built into the process and you're constantly listening to understand what people need to do their jobs. Report incidents. What counts as reportable? In an ideal world, you'd have a relationship good enough with like people in the team where there's enough visibility that people will just drop you a message and say, I've seen this, not too sure, what do you think, for the things that they're not sure of. But then for the the common things, like whether it's a phishing email, whatever it is, there needs to be a clear process for reporting that. So whether it's an email, a mailbox, a team member, there needs to be a clear process for repeating things that are problematic. And then manage vendor risk. What does management mean? So again, get quite specific. Can this supplier access our data? So that goes down to looking at security schedules and things like that, and translating what has been agreed already with what you'd like people to do in practice. And then translation examples. So least privilege. Rather than saying least privilege, you can say only use the access genuinely needed for your role. Data classification. Handle information based on how sensitive it is. Phishing resilience. Pause before acting on unusual messages and urgent requests. Vendor risk. Check suppliers before giving them access to your systems or data. Incident reporting. Tell the right team quickly if something looks wrong. So for each of these, you can see on the left, as security professionals, you look at it, you understand exactly what it means. But when you translate it into just words, plain, simple English, it's far more easy to understand. It's easier to grasp. A secondary school child would understand what is being asked of them. It's a clear instruction. And then non-technical teams need security messages that are relevant to their work. Tailor it down, go in, understand their work. It's not enough to produce policies or security materials that don't have any relevance to what people are doing or don't have any, it doesn't seem like it belongs to the organization. You always need to go in and tailor it to make sure that people can see that you've actually tried to understand their work, because that will help, 2 points. That will help them comply, and 2, at policy writing level, you should be speaking to stakeholders in these areas to make sure that what you've written also reflects the reality of the environment and the practicalities. And then be specific, plain and free from unnecessary jargon. I would say if you're not talking to a technical audience, just cut out the jargon, cut out the keywords. I don't think it does anything for helping people feel comfortable about security. It's better for people to be doing the right things but not know what they're called than to be aware of the that terminology but they're not doing the right thing. So focus on what you want to achieve right at the end. So behavior change, right? Focus on that and be as simple as possible so that you can carry everyone along, regardless of the background they're coming from. So specific about the expected action. It should be very clear once someone has read a security message what the hell they need to do. It's not enough for someone to read something once, because what really happens is that someone will read something, it doesn't make much sense, but they're like, I've actually got other things to do, so they'll move on to what they're doing and they'll forget your message, compared to if they read it, they've got some examples in there, they know exactly how it relates to them, you've illustrated it well, you've been clear, and the next steps are very, very clear to them. That is going to be the ideal situation. Businesses work at really, really fast paced, especially especially startups. So by making sure the message is very, very specific, you've won already. And then based on situations people recognize, try to get very specific in terms of the industry, the challenges that they face in the industry, and the actual activities they carry out day to day. So a hospital will be completely different to a bank. A bank will be completely different to a solicitor's. Make sure that it's clear and aligned with the environment you're operating within. And then based on situations people recognize, exactly make sure that it's a case where people can see themselves in the scenarios that you're describing. And then actionable with a clear next step. They shouldn't read it and think, why was this sent to me? It should be obvious that it has everything to do with them and what they need to do next. And then safe to report without fear. These messagings and just general security awareness culture is all done with an aim of building a two-way communication. So it's not enough for security professionals to like sit over here and the rest of the companies here. We should be creating a bridge and a two-way communication for people to be comfortable to raise things without fear of punishment or shame of like fear or whatever it is, that they might be embarrassed or shamed or whatever it is. Take every single thing someone tells you externally as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to improve the security awareness program, because that's the only way that it improves. So these are some before and afters. So follow the access control policy. And then a better message is more detailed. It's saying use your own account, do not share logins, only request access needed for your role. If someone leaves your team, make sure their access is removed. So in this message, you can see that the access control policy is being made clear. It's talking about least privilege, and it's talking about the joiners, movers, and leavers program. But no, there's no technical jargon in there. It's just very, very plain, but it's illustrating exactly what is expected. And then translate by role, not just by topic. So the same security principle should have a different almost iteration depending on who you're talking to. So make sure that someone can, let's say you're doing a sales-specific training session or messaging, it's different to the C-suite, it's different to the marketing team, it's different to the engineers. You need to align things with the level of understanding they have and the level of threat they face as well. So like the sales team, they interface with a lot of people externally. They might have sales pressure, they might have sales target pressure. They might have things that might make them behave differently to someone in a different area of the business compared to the security team. Compared to the engineering team. So they, like developers, they might be, they're keen to finish their product, they want things to work well. So they're more likely to be using something like AI and uploading data into there, for example. So tailor the messaging appropriately to make sure that people understand where they stand in what you're saying, what you're trying to achieve. So finance, be aware of business email compromise. So pause before changing supplier bank details. Approving urgent payment requests or acting on invoice changing. So rather than just seeing that someone has asked you to make changes to a transaction, pick up the phone and call them and ask them to verify that it's indeed a genuine request. So this example, this is not going to happen to someone that's a developer. This is very specific to the finance team. HR, follow data protection requirements. So treat employee records, payroll data, ID documents, discipline information as sensitive. Share only through the approved routes. No one else in the business, apart from HR, has the responsibility of doing this. So that's why it's important to give a specific example. And then sales and customer teams, protect customer data. Before sending customer data, check the recipient, file permissions, link settings, and whether the information should be shared. Again, very, very specific to this particular job role. Procurement and operations. Manage vendor risk. Before a supplier gets access to a company's data or system, check who owns the supplier relationship, what they need access to, and what access they should have. Again, very, very specific, but making sure that people can see themselves in the examples you're giving. And I think it will also go far in getting people to ask you clarifying questions, because that's when you realize where there may be weaknesses in what you've designed. And then leadership. We have a high I am risk. Compared to unclear access ownership could lead to unauthorized access to customer data and critical systems. Leadership needs to decide whether to fund access cleanup this quarter or accept the risk temporarily. Very, very direct. It's understood what leadership needs to do and why or how it might impact the business. So the method is to translate security into 5 steps. So you outline the security issue. What are you concerned about? 2, business impact. We always link it back to how this can impact the business. So what could happen? If we don't do X, Y might happen. And then role relevance. Why does this matter to the team? Why should we be bothered at all? Why should we spend money on this? And then say, because this is specifically why. Expected behavior. What should they do differently? When you're in X scenario, do Y. And then reporting route, where should they go? Typically, it's going to be the security team. If you're a larger organization, it might be security operations versus the risk team, depending on what it is. Outline who specifically they should be speaking to. And then these are more examples of how to translate technical wording into layman's terms. So enable MFA. Never approve prompts you did not request. Data classification. Check how sensitive information is before sharing it. Report incidents. Report quickly if something looks wrong or you made a mistake. Note there that rather than saying incidents, you're calling out what it is specifically, so making it very clear. And then unapproved SaaS. Do not upload company data into tools that have not been approved. And then you could list a list of approved tools. Least privilege. Only request and keep access to what you need to do your job. Very, very simple. So a strong security message should be short, specific, in plain English, linked to real work so they can relate to it, focused on behavior. So what do they need to do instead? Clear about what they need to do, clear about what to report, and then scatter some examples throughout so that you're reinforcing the messaging. So this is the messaging formula. When you see this, do this because this is what it protects. So using this formula, people are understanding the why behind the ask. So it's quite common for people to want to rebel when they don't understand why specifically they're being asked. But the minute you clarify with them, have a conversation with them, they're like, okay, I understand. It almost consolidates their learning or consolidates their knowledge. So always explain why, give examples, and make them understand why it will benefit the business or them as an individual. And then security communication is working well when teams know what applies to them, people can explain the risk in plain language, policies are easier to follow, reporting happens earlier, security is included in normal decisions, leaders understand risk trade-offs, teams know when to pause, verify, and ask. Translating security is not dumbing it down, so don't look at it like you need to strip out all the good information. You're just, rather than speaking English to someone that only speaks French, you're speaking their language. You're putting it in terms that they will understand, to make sure that it's something that they, 1, have an understanding of, and 2, are able to follow. Security is only effective when people can translate it into the next safe action. If they don't know the so what, as in like, why do we need to do this, there is no point. So making sure that you're communicating clearly when it comes to security makes it really obvious what the next safe action is. So if you need any support in this area, I have a security awareness pack that I've linked below, and I'm also available for consultations online. Thanks so much for watching.